Because if motivation were truly emotional, the strongest people in history would have been the most emotional ones. They weren't. They were cold when necessary, bored when required, unmoved by comfort, unimpressed by applause. Here is the uncomfortable truth most people never confront. If you only act when you feel motivated, you are not in control of your life. Your moods are. And moods are weak rulers. You wake up every morning negotiating with yourself. You ask is the day. You ask if the fire is there. That question alone tells me everything. You have placed power in the wrong place. Jim Rohn once said that motivation is not something you wait for, it's something you build. But what most people never understood is that he wasn't talking about motivation as a single force. There are levels to it, layers, depths. And if you stay trapped in the first level, you will spend your entire life starting and never finishing. But there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. Most people live their entire lives inside the lowest level of motivation, and they don't even realize it. They think they're driven. They think they're ambitious. They think they want more. But what actually drives them is pain avoidance. They move only when things hurt enough. They act only when consequences become unbearable. They change only when comfort collapses. This is the first level of motivation, pain. Pain is loud. Pain is urgent. Pain screams. You work harder when bills pile up. You study when failure becomes public. You change your body when shame becomes unbearable. You leave relationships when suffering outweighs familiarity. Pain is a powerful teacher, but a terrible master. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He observed that men are far more motivated by fear of loss than by hope of gain, not because they are evil, but because loss feels immediate. Hope feels distant. Pain forces action, but only temporarily. Once the pain fades, so does the discipline. That's why most people relapse. They don't fail because they're weak. They fail because their motivation was borrowed from suffering. And suffering always negotiates. You tell yourself, I'll work hard until things stabilize. You tell yourself, once I'm comfortable, I'll slow down just a little. That little becomes everything. Stoic philosophers warned against this trap. They knew that a man who requires pressure to move is already defeated, because pressure is external, and anything external can be removed. Pain-based motivation produces bursts of effort, not mastery. It creates survivors, not builders. It creates urgency, not identity. But here's what's unsettling. Pain is where most people stop. They never move beyond it. They live in cycles, chaos, effort, relief, decay, repeating the same pattern under different names, different jobs, different relationships, different goals, same weakness. And now comes the part most motivational speakers avoid telling you. The second level of motivation is not happiness. It is not passion. It is not excitement. It is reward. This is where ambition lives. This is where goals are set. This is where society teaches you to aim. Money, status, recognition, freedom, applause. At this level, you don't move because you're hurting. You move because you want something. This is more sophisticated than pain, but still fragile. Because reward-based motivation trains you to ask a dangerous question. What do I get if I do this? And once that question enters your mind, discipline becomes conditional. You work harder when the reward is visible. You lose focus when progress feels slow. You compare yourself constantly because rewards are relative. Social media thrives on this level. It weaponizes reward, likes, views, validation. You begin to measure your worth externally. And once you do that, you surrender control. Jim Rohn warned that success pursued only for rewards creates hollow man, because rewards can disappear overnight. Markets crash, fame fades, people forget. And when the reward vanishes, so does your drive. But there's a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. Most people never realize that pain and reward are siblings. Opposites on the surface, identical at the core. Both are reactive. Both are external. Both place your motivation outside of you, which means both can be taken away. The Stoics would say that a man dependent on outcomes is enslaved by fate. Machiavelli would say he is ruled by fortune rather than virtue. But Jim Rohn saw something else, something quieter, something rarer. There is a third level of motivation, and almost no one reaches it intentionally. This level does not care about pain. It does not negotiate with reward. It is not emotional. It is not loud. It does not need witnesses. It is identity. At this level, you do not act because you feel like it. You act because this is who you are. The work is no longer a task. It is an expression. You don't ask if you're motivated. You ask if the action aligns with your standard. This is where discipline becomes silent. Effort becomes automatic. Resistance weakens. A man operating from identity doesn't rise and fall with circumstances. He doesn't bargain with comfort. He doesn't require urgency. He moves because not moving would violate who he has decided to be. This is why the most dangerous people in history were not the loudest. They were consistent, unimpressed by praise, unshaken by criticism, unmoved by chaos. They did not chase motivation. They embodied it. But here's the part that should unsettle you. Identity-based motivation is built through sacrifice, through repetition, through doing the right thing long after the feeling disappears. And once you build it, you can never go back. Because when identity forms, excuses die. And in the next part, and we're going to expose why most people are terrified of this level, why the mind resists it, and why comfort is its greatest enemy. Because there is a darker layer beneath identity itself, and we haven't touched it yet. At the lower levels, you are constantly bargaining with yourself. At the level of pain, you ask, how bad does it have to get before I move? At the level of reward, you ask, is this worth it? But at the level of identity, a different question emerges, and it is ruthless. Is this who I am or who I pretend to be? That question burns excuses alive. This is why most people subconsciously avoid identity-based motivation. Because once you say, I am disciplined, laziness is no longer a mistake, it becomes a betrayal. Once you say, I am a builder, procrastination feels like treason. Once you say, I am dangerous with my time, distraction becomes shameful. Identity creates internal consequences far more severe than external punishment. This is why comfort is so seductive. Comfort delays identity formation. Comfort allows you to remain undefined. As long as you are trying, you can fail without confronting yourself. As long as you are working on it, you can hide from commitment. As long as you are motivated sometimes, you never have to decide who you actually are. Jim Rohn understood that personal development is not about doing more, it's about becoming more. But what he rarely said explicitly is this: becoming more requires killing versions of yourself you've grown attached to. The version that needs rest before effort. The version that needs validation before commitment. The version that needs certainty before action. Those versions feel like you, but they are not you. They are habits wearing your face. Here is where the psychology turns dark. Your brain is not designed to help you evolve. It is designed to keep you alive. And alive means familiar, predictable, safe. Identity level motivation threatens that system. Because when you decide who you are, you also decide who you are no longer allowed to be. And the brain resists that with everything it has. It will remind you of your past failures. It will bring up old doubts. It will flood you with fatigue at the exact moment commitment is required. Not because you are weak, but because you are changing the rules. This is why most people mistake resistance for a sign to stop. They feel friction and assume something is wrong. But resistance is not a stop sign, it is a checkpoint. The Stoics believed that the obstacle is the way. Machiavelli believed that men are revealed under pressure. Jim Rohn believed that discipline weighs ounces while regret weighs tons. But there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. Identity alone is not enough, because identity can still be fragile if it is borrowed. If your identity depends on being seen as disciplined, if it depends on being admired, if it depends on comparison, then you have simply wrapped reward-based motivation in better language. True identity-based motivation is private. No audience, no applause, no announcement. You do the work even when it goes unnoticed. Especially when it goes unnoticed, this is where motivation transforms into something colder, principle. At this stage, action is no longer fueled by emotion or desire. It is governed by rules you have chosen in advance. You don't ask how you feel in the morning. You follow the rule. You don't wait for clarity. You execute the principle. This is how elites operate. This is how power is built quietly. Look at history closely and you'll notice something unsettling. The people who shaped eras were not constantly inspired. They were structured. They built systems that remove choice. Choice drains energy. Principle conserves it. When you decide once, you don't decide again. Most people exhaust themselves debating whether to work, debating whether to train, debating whether today counts. At the highest level of motivation, debate disappears. And that is terrifying to the undisciplined mind, because debate gives the illusion of control. Principle removes it. But there is still one final layer we haven't exposed yet, the layer almost no one talks about, because it forces you to confront something uncomfortable. Motivation, at its deepest level, is not about achieving. It is about fear of self-contempt, not fear of failure, not fear of poverty, not fear of rejection, fear of becoming someone you cannot respect. This is the motivation that does not scream. It whispers. You feel it late at night, when no one is watching, when the noise is gone. It asks one question: is this the man you said you would be? That question does not care about circumstances. It does not negotiate with mood. It does not accept excuses. And once you hear it clearly, you cannot unhear it. This is why true motivation feels heavy, because it comes with responsibility. Once you know who you could be, staying the same becomes painful. Not dramatic pain, not loud pain, quiet, corrosive pain, the kind that eats away at self-respect. This is why some people would rather stay distracted than disciplined, because distraction numbs that voice. Scroll long enough and it goes quiet, consume enough and it fades. But it never dies. Jim Rohn said that we must all suffer one of two pains, the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. What he didn't say is that regret is not loud at first. It starts as disappointment, then dissatisfaction, then bitterness. Then one day you realize your life feels smaller than it should, and by then, motivation doesn't matter anymore. But here is the final brutal truth. Motivation is not what changes your life. Standards do. When your standard rises, your behavior follows. When your standard drops, excuses multiply. Pain pushes you, reward pulls you, identity anchors you. But standards imprison you in the best way. They trap you into consistency. And once consistency takes over, motivation becomes irrelevant. You don't need to feel ready. You don't need to feel inspired. You don't need to feel confident. You just act. And action shapes identity faster than thought ever could. Now look back to the beginning. You thought motivation was something you were supposed to feel, a spark, a rush, a moment. That belief was dangerous because the strongest people do not feel motivated more often than others. They simply refuse to betray themselves. And once you understand that, this video doesn't really end. It loops because the moment you stop waiting to feel motivated is the moment you finally take control. And that takes us back to the beginning.